Good morning, watchers. Welcome to Brother Sal's Sunday gathering at the storehouse. Glad to be here once again and very happy that you're still listening. In fact, thank you for so many listening to our broadcast from last week. Seems that more and more people are starting to get interested in what we have to say, and we welcome you here to the show. Tony's with me again today, and he's got some very interesting things to say. So, good morning, Tone.
Good morning, Dad. I'm checking out the news today and happy to see, so many people are paying attention to our report now, at least for us. We just started this several months ago, our YouTube channels, and I remember when there were only half a dozen people a week checking out what we had to say. So I feel like I need to reiterate why you want to stick with us and listen to us, because we've been right for the last several years, especially with the fall of Libya and Iraq and Syria being the three horns from Daniel's prophecy. We have a very unique perspective, I think, in the world, in that when I look at all the Christian eschatology, or so-called or supposed eschatology that's dealing with the end times, according to the religious scripture of the Christians, I am just overwhelmed. Everybody's following Jonathan Cahn and the Shemitah year, which, we've taught about that over on our YouTube site, about what a Cahn, C-O-N, that really is. And that Shemitah cycle has nothing to do with the Gentiles whatsoever. And then the Christians even less. And then whoever saw God dealing with the Jews to whom it applies every 7 years? When did that happen? He waited 490 years and then sent them into bondage for 70 years. So trying to draw this law from Leviticus out now and apply it to the Gentile stock market. I mean, it really is absurd. It shows how absurd the modern Christian view of history at this time, why they're not looking in the right place, why they're not seeing it. They're all full of fear and hype, and a meteor's coming, and Obama's the Antichrist, and the Pope's the false prophet, and it's all going to happen on September. Well, here we are in September. I sure hope those people like that Renee M., whoever that is out there that gets hundreds of thousands of views for pointing out that Obama's the Antichrist and that Walt Disney movies are constantly telling us about the end because they want us to know it's September 23rd. Well, okay, when September 23rd comes and goes next week, can we put the word out to stop listening to that? See? And so that's why, this is a very valuable resource, is what I'm finding, because for some reason we have a much more realistic and evidentiary perspective on Scripture and of history. I don't hear any of these people explain how it is that the Pope, the leader of the Church of Jesus Christ, is going to be able to confirm someone other than Jesus as the Messiah of the Jews. How's that possible? I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm just saying nobody seems to confront that point in the argument and all this Christian. They simply point at all this anti-Christian policies and behavior. But what's new about that? Right? What is new about anti-Christian behavior? Okay, go back to Antiochus Epiphanes. Go back to the destruction of the temple. Go back to the beginning of the church. Go see what they did to those first Jewish apostles who were trying to tell the world that this Jesus of Nazareth, in fact, his death paid the price for everybody and he was the Messiah. Well, the Jews hunted him down and had him killed. So, the spirit of Antichrist was already at work in Paul's day. Nobody seems to have a grip in the modern world on what is that? What does that mean? What's at work? The spirit of anti-Christianity? Well, what is that exactly? Is that anti-Christian behavior essentially amoral behavior or immoral behavior? Is that what anti-Christian activity is? No, Christians. Sinning is a Christian thing. Sinning is a human thing. Jesus covered the sins of Christians, but they keep sinning. Read Romans. Paul says to the church, you who do the same things, what are you judging each other for? No. The difference in Christians is that simply that their sins have been covered. But sinning is a perfectly Christian thing. So the anti-Christian behavior, as it always has been in Scripture, is denying Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah that was promised to the Jews. That's the issue. Not moral behavior or amoral behavior. Christians think that they have acceptable behavior, but it's only because they don't understand any other Scripture. So what I find most interesting about our perspective is that we're not just looking at anti-Christian behavior in the world and claiming that it's the end of the world and God's judging the homosexuals and the Pope is the obvious false prophet. Why? Because he's a pagan. I mean, the whole religion is nothing but paganized. It's the pagan religion under the name of Christianity. And we can tell as we go over in our Bible study, they don't know the first thing about the Bible. All they do is judge. They're separating people into heaven and hell. And that's what we're going through in the Bible study right now. Is what does that even mean? We're finding out that hell is nothing like what we've been taught, and heaven may not even be a place at all. I mean, heaven, Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within. Well, how does that work? So anyway, the perspective that I hope will keep people around here, you that are new and wondering what we have to offer, is that we seem to understand the Scriptures and can therefore give a much more valid description of how it fits the prophecies of these Judeo-Christian eschatological viewpoint. And so it's to that. And I often bring up the Arab Spring because, we saw this all starting to happen at the Arab Spring. You can go back to what I was blogging even then. You could go back to what I was saying on my father's show even then. And this has been a few years now. And, New York Times, which I'm going to get to today, one of the articles in the New York Times. But the New York Times and all these very, the sort of respected media agencies were all talking about the Arab Spring as a reaction to democracy and freedom. These people were getting a taste of democracy and freedom, and they wanted it. And they were using their iPhones and their Facebook and this new technology to tap in to that freedom, and they were so ready for it that they had popular uprisings that overthrew their tyrannical governments. And what a great news, right? This was the dawn of a new era, is what we were being told. A new era. And I was one of the only voices I could find, my father and I, in our ministry, saying that no, in fact, this is a setup. This is a wolf in sheep's clothing. This is just opening the door so the Sharia style hardline governments can now take the place of these moderate governments, and you can have a real threat appear to Israel. And that's what we were saying. And the context not only hasn't changed, but now it's starting to become much more apparent to everyone. And you don't find any of these same people talking about what a brilliant thing the Arab Spring. Look at what it's led to. So anyhow, I hope that will encourage people to, listen to us a little bit and not just think we're like everybody else, repeating these news articles just to keep you in fear and keep you all hyped up on the latest, fear porn, because that's not at all what we're trying to do. We have a very unique look at the current geopolitical stage, the way we have been watching it consistently for now almost 20 years through our ministry, and for the last 15 years, quite literally pointing out that thanks to the meeting in 2000 in Egypt, when they decided to find this roadmap to peace with the Jews, that became this two-basket plan, that Libya, Syria, and Iraq all said, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, and Assad regimes all said, no, we can't go with this deal. And now we see, of course, what it is. It was a deal to completely modernize all the Islamic regimes and make them puppet governments, which is, what's going on. But first has to be this great civil war. First has to be this great war to destroy all these people, to reduce their numbers, and then they'll set up some sort of puppet government over them, where Israel now will have the upper hand in the open instead of just in the dark as they do now. And we've been going over the Mossad. These people's slogan is, through deception, thou shalt do war. That's quite a slogan, isn't it? For people talking about peace and freedom and democracy and all this kind of stuff. So I'm trying to help people see my perspective, which is that the context of what's going on today cannot be viewed simply by falling into it as if this whole world just developed in the last 10 years and all these crises from ISIS to Iraq, this quagmire that Dick Cheney predicted 20 years ago would result if we overthrew Saddam Hussein. You can go see the video out of his own mouth. He said, yeah, we shouldn't go and do that right now in Iraq. And the reason was it would result in a quagmire of all these different competing interests that no longer have any sort of authority over them to keep them down. And so now you'll have just essentially civil war. So to pretend that we didn't know this was coming, and this is something I keep repeating and I want to get to this week. I want to keep trying to reinforce the view that whatever's going on right now, the people in charge that are bringing us this news, the people who are spewing all these lies, they've known about it for many years. And yet I want to get to some articles today where it's as if we're reacting to everything. One of them even the New York Times article, maybe it's the other article, the business article out of the UK. They even point out that we're in this reactive stance. And I find that absurd, considering that you can look at 20 years of history and see all these things being predicted as the circumstances that had to do with our meddling in the Middle East. And, if we take out these regimes, this is what we will face. So there's no pretending this is all, refugee crisis? Who knew? Yeah, they've been talking about it for years. They knew for years. And one of the things I just learned this week that I think is very interesting is that these refugees have been leaving Syria for a couple of years now, seeing the writing on the wall, knowing that this regime change is going to result in a puppet government, and that puppet government is going to put down, since what they're going for are these puppet governments of this radicalized Sunni type that want a Sharia world, which has been it's been deceptively shown to the world that this is what a Sharia Islamic world looks like, and that's just not true. That's the first thing to keep in mind, is that this is not Islam. Just like the Christians that go out and shoot abortion doctors and claim to be doing God's will are not Christians. They can claim to be Christians, but the actual Christian theology refutes them. And so these Islamist terrorists are invalidated by that very statement. There is no such thing as a Muslim terrorist. So this is all that it's all that delusional, all right? And so if you're, for the people that keep talking about ISIS like they're this real group instead of a proxy army for the United States, it's absurd. And so there's a few people out there that are pointing out the truth that's unavoidable, that these are people that work for us. Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, Boko Haram was the one I forgot last week down in Africa. ISIS, these are all the same, this is all the same force, the same money flowing to these same people. And that money is all controlled by the central bankers of the West. This isn't money coming from Iran. Why are they fighting Iran? So, anyhow, what I found out this week that I thought was very important is that for a couple of years now, the Syrians that see the writing on the wall, in is coming another puppet regime, and it's going to be this terrorizing regime. And what are they already saying they're going to do? They're going to start slaughtering the Syrian Christians and Syrian Shias. So these people know that. I mean, it's happening everywhere around there. Where look at Libya, look at Africa, look at everywhere where we give guns to somebody. The other people that were living peacefully realize, time's up. Time for us to get slaughtered by whatever moves the warmongers are making. Who are they giving guns to? So, and when you look at the few, you can't find it much in our media, but I've been talking to a friend in Europe, and there's a little bit where they're interviewing these people, and like I was saying, they're doctors, they're lawyers, these are affluent people leaving Syria ahead of the pack because they can. And so first they went into Turkey, because of course it's on the border. It's not such a big, remember, does everyone want to leave their home? My parents live up in California right now where the fires are very near. It's quite a scary thing. Where they live, my aunt has been evacuated a couple of times over the years for fires that approach that heavily wooded town. And as people may know who are following the news, one of the towns over there was completely burnt down, the whole town, what a sad situation. But so now these people who have to flee that town when the fire's coming, is there anybody that doesn't want to go back to their home? Is there anyone who wants it to last forever and say, okay, I guess we're leaving our home, we're never going back? Nobody seems to mention that in the media. Do these people, are these refugees just people that never want to return to their family and friends and their familiar surroundings? Or is what we're doing, central bankers, American military complex, NATO, is what we are doing so long-term awful that the intelligent people know that it's over. Our country is ruined. We can never go back in our lifetime. Is that why it's so bad? Is because they're smart enough to know, they're intelligent people, they know the writing's on the wall, and they're about to become another Iraq with a dictator who slaughters everybody who wants any kind of actual democracy or freedom or even the standard of living that they're used to. They're about to see central banking laws imposed, austerity and controlled media and all the things we accuse them of now, which when you finally realize the truth, of course, Iranians live under a much more autonomous feeling like Mexicans of being part of their own culture and free to engage in their culture the way they want. Nobody's more controlled than American culture. Nobody's got more laws, more restrictions, more permits, more controlled media, more controlled elections. Nobody's got more than America and the West. It's a wag the dog joke. So we point what I'm learning is we point the finger at these other countries like Cuba, which I've had many friends now over the years have been to Cuba. And, I grew up my whole life. Cuba was the enemy. Cuba was Cuba was that one small nation in the world that was an example of how awful it could be under a communist dictator. And then as I grow up and friends go visit, they say, wow, Cuba's really great. I mean, they're wonderful to visitors, healthcare. I mean, people are content even with very little, funny, like Mexico, all these places that don't have quite as big a money pit as, say, France or Italy or Spain or, Western Europe and America, England, all these places that are absolute hellholes now. They've become nothing but segregated societies, people who are blind, the most unilluminated human beings in the world. Americans are, among the least healthy, both physically and mentally. They're on more drugs for their mental conditions, and they eat, more processed food than anybody in the world. I mean, anything you look at, draw a line on any front, and what you find is we're a degraded society. We're an absurd society, and so you have to look at, what are these maniacs after? What is the point of all this, of lying about other people and meddling in their business with all the truly, all my life Africans have been starving. And when I was young, we were going to feed them. We knew we could. We could feed we could feed people. We had enough resources and riches. The calculations were done. We can feed people. Instead, all my life, if anything, it's only gotten worse in Africa. And meanwhile, we can afford to go, we had to disrupt Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. We have to have our money. Israel, right? Why? Let's face it, people. Come on, get a bigger picture. What is the connection with Israel, and what makes you think all this Arab Spring and first putting in these regimes, Mubarak, Hussein, the Kingdom of Saud, all these absurd regimes, the Jordanian Kingdom, right? All the way back from England. For 100 years, the money and support that goes to these puppet regimes in this world. And then the money that we send to Israel and the weaponry. Why? What kind of peace exactly? Or what kind of peace process has been going on over there? And so if you don't dig into that part of the subject matter, and all you want to do is pick apart what's the strategy of Russia in Syria, what's the Iran nuclear deal about? These are, you will be lost in this until you get sucked right into the war and start believing that, Iran blew something up in Israel, or ISIS blew up an airport in America or in Europe. You'll start taking this on like it's what they're presenting. And so I feel that one of the things I'm always required to do is try and break down a little bit that wag the dog image, because I know how strong it is. It's not something that you can just hear me say once and then you go away and you're bombarded with your New York Times that looks so authoritative, and you think, what's that guy on the internet know? New York Times, this is real media. Yeah, it's real media, all right. So let's get to what some of these people are saying right now, and then we'll try and get back to the deeper issue with the final article I want to get to today that is out of that most proverbial of mouthpieces called the New York Times. But first, I have Yahoo email for years. I'm in the process of trying. I have a Gmail account now, and boy, oh boy, I much prefer Gmail. I don't know how many people feel that way, but Yahoo's a real pain in the butt for me. Gmail's far superior. But in my inbox every day, I get my daily Yahoo stories. And so normally when I see that little Yahoo signal, I go through and I delete all of those automatically. I don't pay any attention to the advertisements and the such. But out of curiosity, this past week, I started clicking on my daily Yahoo stories to see, with everything that's going on in the world, let's see what are they presenting as the daily Yahoo stories for me, because they're my daily Yahoo stories. Theoretically, they would be chosen based on the searches and such that I do on the internet. That was my first interesting realization that, well, I guess they're not. Okay, so let's start with September 10th. Okay, this is 10 days ago. I just want to run through these quick because this one, they have a cover one and then a bunch of recommended reads. And the cover for 10 days ago is a picture of the scarecrow Hillary Clinton saying, and the title is "What Clinton Would Do If Iran Violated the Deal." The presidential hopeful says she wouldn't hesitate to take military action if the nation tried to obtain nuclear weapons. Right? So right now I want to just paint this broad vision of where our intelligentsia supposedly is coming from. Okay, this is President Canada of the United States, one of our, senior statesmen of our country. Of course, there is never a word about the overpowering military that Israel has, and the fact that nobody accuses Iran of even having the first nuclear weapon. The fact that they say they don't abide that state of Israel, which we've talked about the reasons why, but at the same time, you can't point to one single incident of them harming Jews that have lived in their country for, generations. So, again, absurd. This is our presidential hopeful saying she wouldn't hesitate. In other words, give me an excuse. I'll bomb them. I mean, as if. So I want to let this build, because the major thing we got to talk about, I think, is Russia's military response now in Syria, because that's what's big in our news. But let's talk about what's really going on there. But first, let me run through a few of these, and just to show how these can't be my daily news stories picked for me, because maybe the Iran deal, all right, I do search Iran, but the recommended reads, House Republicans just won a major unexpected victory. No, I spend zero time looking at the political game show of America. Carly Fiorina's response after Trump insulted her looks. Yeah, I spend a lot of time on that kind of stuff on the internet. One look at the world's sexiest nurse and you will flatline. Okay, yeah, not much here. Justin Timberlake shares the cutest photos of baby son Silas. Yeah, I never search any of this pop culture stuff. And then 7 myths about radiant heat debunked. So these are the recommended reads for me. 10 days ago. Nothing about the refugee crisis, which I've been searching. Nothing about Yemen. Nothing about Syria. Right? So I guess either these are drawn from a lotto of propaganda they want you to distract you with. So anyway, that was 10 days ago. What Clinton would do, she'd bomb them. On the 12th, my Yahoo stories. The top one was official warns of unintended incidents in Syria. Now, this is from 8 days ago on the 12th. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Moscow is sending in troops and urges coordination with the U.S. So this was going on from when the U.S. is trying to paint Russia as an aggressor, and Russia's saying, hey, we're not looking for unintended incidents. Again, the rest of the recommended reads. Iran says finds unexpectedly high uranium reserve. Apple makes iPhone. Mike Huckabee thinks black people can't legally become American citizens. Rick Perry torches Donald Trump. Katie Holmes goes undercover in disguise to meet boyfriend. Okay. Again, pop culture garbage for someone like me who never, ever, ever searches that stuff ever. I never click on one of those icons when I see that garbage. So, yeah. So I just want people to see out there, what is this news? Okay. Now let's get to this week. Monday's top stories for me, the 14th. GOP candidates to attend Pope events. They were making the point that even the people that disagree with the Pope still got to be there. So that just goes to show where your bread is buttered, doesn't it? I mean, does the Pope care about missing one of these big congressmen's to-dos? Does the Pope send his greetings to the GOP candidate or what? But these guys, even if they disagree with the Pope, they got to come and kiss the ring anyway. So just consider that in the world of politics and power. Who is this guy that, I mean, most of the constituency doesn't believe in it. Let's face it. Catholics nowadays, you can look at the numbers. People don't believe in the old-time religion anymore. They might still want to hang on to some moral authority that they believe in, because even the atheists have acknowledged morality is a human, is just as human as the wagging of a dog's tail. It's just the way we're built. But not many even religious people are able to support the hardline religion. And so instead of speaking out against the Pope and minimalizing his authority and marginalizing, anybody who would think to mix their political view just because they're a Catholic. Well, yeah, okay, so we'll bow to the Pope, but come on, we can't take the Pope seriously. I mean, that's the way everybody really feels in the constituency, and yet these guys got to go kiss the Pope's ring. So anyway, that's just talk for another day. I think we'll probably get to it here maybe in the next couple of weeks with the Pope's visit, and we'll try and get to a deeper picture of, these guys play in the Middle East. Let's not forget what's going on right now. There's war in the Middle East. Pope's talking about climate change issues and, humanitarian issues. But where's he pointing out that these Jews over there don't even have a right to that land? And they're terrorizing their Arab neighbors. And the Muslim religion is waiting for Jesus to return as well. Why are they our enemies? So, I don't hear the Pope quite saying what you'd expect. So, September 15th now, my Yahoo Daily Stories. Putin's Syria support worries Washington. So from 5 days ago now, the top story. And then the other ones, American Ninja Warrior, Jessica Simpson and Nick Lachey. Israel forces storm Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's the only other interesting headline in all the stories so far. You got photos of the day and then another Carly Fiorina ad. So she's been on there twice. I've never even heard of her. Apparently Donald Trump insulted her, and that's become what's so important. But we're going to get to this Israeli forces storm Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque. I think we're going to try and end on that today. But here we go. 5 days ago, we get the headline story: Putin's Syria support worries Washington. We're going to get into that article, so I'll save the commentary about this reactionary display by all the Western powers, as if nothing that's going on was expected. It's just all happening, and they're reacting to it. So then the 16th, the next day, a few days ago, Syrian president blames West for refugee crisis. Quote, if you're worried about them, stop supporting terrorists. That's pretty popular. I think people have heard that. I'm just going through, these are the, obviously it's all the mouthpiece stuff. This is what I'm trying to, I want to draw the strings together here now into the prophetic look and into this deeper look that nobody seems to be talking about, least of all the Christians. And then the recommended reads, Mitch McConnell ties Iran deal to recognition of Israel. Jessica Simpson brags about her hot husband. Zimbabwe's Mugabe reads the wrong speech. Muslim ninth grader arrested for bringing an electronics project to school. I mean, I haven't even I haven't read that story because just the headline makes me want to throw up. The idea that we're going to use this now to demonize this poor kid. And then the last one, Russian move in Syria flummox U.S. See, we're just in a flummox. We're perplexed. Russia's recent military buildup in Syria has perplexed the Obama administration and left it in a quandary as how to respond. I mean, is anybody else a little bit concerned that our military-industrial complex that we spend a fortune on, that can, blow up the world 100 times and hasn't had a competition for its power in a generation, is flummoxed and in a quandary over something that you can go back and see one of our own political leaders projected that this is what would happen from 20 years ago. Are we really that? Is it really such a quandary? And then I love this from the 18th. The top story was Carly Fiorina. I mean, I guess I got to find out who this woman is. Debate darling to political bullseye. This is the headline of the top story from the 18th with all that's going on. And then the recommended reads. One of ISIS's top commanders was a star pupil of U.S. Special Forces training in the country of Georgia. It's one on my headline today that I find just another indicator of what they tell us. And then you got Ann Coulter rips the GOP's playing to blaspheme Jews. I don't want to say F-U-C-K-ing Jews. So yeah, Ann Coulter being the bad guy on the media so they can control the argument. Then we got Victoria's Secret, most iconic model. Jared Weaver gets fed up with Kyle Seager's antics and baseball. Nothing. All the things I'm always searching, nothing but pop culture. So, but we will get to this article about the ISIS commander. I find that interesting. And then the last one for Saturday. The 19th. Top story. Obama nominates first openly gay Army secretary. Okay, so I see this as this is really too much drama, We got all the Christians are screaming for the God to return and punish all the homosexuals because now they can get married. And so what does the president do? Yeah, let's find an openly gay person to be the Army secretary. When, we went years ago with Clinton through the gays and the military thing. So that's another whole story on its own. But you can just be assured there's these political underpinnings to it all. It's leverage. If you don't imagine that, then of course you don't understand how power works. It's not about who's got the best story. Never has been. It's about who you know, not what you know. So anyway, that's my top story and my recommended reads. Kentucky deputy clerk's lawyer, Donald Trump, Kate Middleton, no more jet skis. Maine tells food stamp recipients, yeah, he's sick of seeing poor people have fun. How dare you be zipping around on snowmobiles instead of looking for jobs. I mean, wow, there's a good Christian nation for you. And then U.S. poised to unveil next super bomber. So that's good news. Yeah, we're not heading to war. We're unveiling new super bombers. But anyway, those are all my top stories. And if you've noticed all these things now for a whole week, where's my story on Yemen? Right? Where's my story on ISIS? ISIS is in the news every day. How come those aren't coming up as recommended reads for me? But all this distraction. So anyway, so let's get off that now and on to the different articles. One of them I have a friend in Hungary who's been, keeping me up with what's going on there. And it's not hard. The mainstream news is keeping us all abreast of the problems. But now, you've got the governments next to them, the Serbian government, they're getting their armies out now because Hungary's closed their borders and are forcing the people to stay on one side of the fence. And whether it was a false flag or not, there was a little bit of a clash between some people. Again, when you look at it, we're talking about hundreds of people and a few thousands. Maybe there's been 100,000 come through now over this time. But again, what we started with today was they've been in Turkey for years. And all of a sudden, this very recently, the Turkish they started pressing them out of Turkey to the north to get out of here, head to Greece now and on to Europe. Can't stay here anymore. 2 million refugees all of a sudden being displaced. See, is anybody talking? I mean, I found it. I was like, oh, well, that starts to put the pieces together. Why they're all of a sudden coming to Europe and haven't been trickling in for years like this from Europe. No, they were going to Turkey, where they were still close to home and could possibly return or whatever, monitor or be closer to their people that were still there. And then Turkey threw them out and they got nowhere to go. So they went north into Greece. And so all of this, I mean, the one thing that's been pretty understood now, I think, by the alternative guys out there is that this is all being orchestrated. There's no way to pretend that this is all just suddenly happening. And all these countries had no anticipation of it. I mean, they knew they were going to throw them out of Turkey. Where were they going to go? Is anybody talking about that? I haven't seen it once, especially in the big media. So anyway, this one from an online source called Politico Pro. It might be a European one. I don't know. It was forwarded to me by my friend in Hungary. And the title of it is Orban's Police State. Hungary's crackdown on refugees is shredding the values of democracy. So, basically it just goes through the whole drama of it. And that now they're set to deny asylum to everybody that's got applications because of what's going on with the having to declare it an emergency situation. That no refugee will be eligible for asylum if they have passed through a safe country. And since Serbia and all EU states were declared safe, then the only way a refugee traveling by land could enter Hungary without passing through a safe state is if the refugee entered through Ukraine, right? So basically, let's just, we're going to make it impossible. If you come from Ukraine, you can come in, but if you come from a company that we've called safe, well, you can't come in our country. You've passed through a safe country. Stay there. And of course, on the surface, that seems reasonable. Well, okay, then why not? Well, because, a little thing called freedom of, movement. I mean, these people, why aren't they free to say, well, I don't want to stay in Serbia. I want to go to Germany. Germany said I can work there. I mean, my great-grandfather came from Sicily. Why didn't they tell him, well, you can go as far as, Spain, but that's it. Why do you have to go all the way to America? So it's just this limitation on human freedom that's, what they're talking about, shredding democratic values. How do we maintain? How do you become? It's quite a well understood psychology that you become your everything you hate if you allow yourself to, right? The person that becomes the vigilante and then winds up being just the same kind of murderer and hater that the people who they were, initially motivated to rebel against. And so how do you keep your own soul, right? How does democracy remain democracy in the face of terrorism or anything else? And, I remember all the arguments about free speech in America. It was always the idea that you can't uphold freedom if you suspend freedom at the same time. If freedom is so strong, then freedom has to live or die on the strength of that freedom. And so, the fact that they're pretending to undermine all that, of course, no one's ever had freedom. That's all a myth. It's all been quite controlled for a long time. And now when you look at my own history, now they're going to tell you have to get vaccinated and you have to get a bank account. You have to. There's so many things that a human has to conform to now, where if you even go back 100 years, think of how much freer the world was. And I don't say that any of that is necessary. It's only become necessary because, if you're going to keep people like cattle in pens, well, then it becomes more difficult as you keep stacking them up and your pens get more crowded. And then, the people in charge can't handle the freedom. The people, the human beings, can handle the freedom. But the people that control them, that's what, the myth of of overpopulation is simply the idea that, yes, if you're going to keep everybody packed into cities and essentially enslave them and bring them food and water, well, once we get too many of them, then that will be a problem, like a company with just outgrowing its capacity. And that's all that really means with the myth of overpopulation, is this company of controllers is outgrowing its capacity. The people are outgrowing the capacity for them to maintain everyone in their fascist way. So in Hungary right now, they're either experimenting, or I don't think they're experimenting with it. This is part of the plan to shut down Hungary so that they can create a more dramatic situation over there. Because remember, the one thing I don't believe you're going to see is anybody make it easy. Nobody's going to talk about, we've seen this coming and we've got plans into place and here's what we're going to do. And now I saw that they're bringing up again the terrorist threat, and so there's many things to be said about that. First of all, as I spoke for a moment, Muslims can't be terrorists, so it's not a legitimate Muslim movement to pretend that these people are emigrating to terrorize the world to spread Islam, because that you could simply reply, well, that won't be Islam that they're spreading. And so whatever it is not Islam. So, we should all be at least on that same page so we can deny them this claim that they are God's people doing God's work, just like the Jews. They should be denied this claim. You might be Jews because you claim to be Jews. Okay, nobody can tell you you're not a Jew, but that ain't your land. That is not the land that was given to your descendants. And so you're just back there with a power play through England and now America, through weapons, through terrorism, and like the slogan of the Mossad, through deception. Thou shalt make war. And so that's what's going on over there. So anyway, the thing in Hungary is, I believe, just to keep making it harder on Europe, to let Europe know that it is going to get harder. And of course, this only exacerbates the situation. And right now, my friend is watching just to see, what the fallout is going to be in Hungary. What it seems to be doing, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, I believe that the bigger play here is the divide and conquer of Europe and America. As soon as some false flags start happening, all the people then are divided. See, why aren't we doing what Orban's doing in Hungary and turning them away? Why are we letting these people in? And then the other people in the country who are real of any kind of a moral spirit are saying, well, because we have to. We don't want to become the worst. We don't want to become our enemy to defeat our enemy. Otherwise we're saying that that's the strong power. Terrorism and denial of human rights and denial of kindness and mercy and justice. These are the things that have to be done. Where, really the stronger play is to say, no, you can't bend us with your terrorism. The whole world will be united against you. But I see that they're sowing the seeds of that division right now. In Hungary, it's already going on. The Hungarians are quite divided. The people think, why can't we just, because they've actually putting laws in place. You can't help these people, or you could be called a terrorist. Does that sound familiar, Americans? So anyway, that's that article. Then the one that I was telling you that came under one of my recommended reads, this is from the Business Insider, which I think we're going to look at a couple of these now. The Business Insider, and this is from the 19th, yesterday, Saturday. One of ISIS top commanders was a star pupil of U.S. Special Forces training in the country of Georgia. So isn't that another interesting thing? You have, anybody remember our Al-Qaeda leader, right? Osama bin Laden? What was he? Oh, he was one of our top pupils, remember? so that we could fight the Russians in Afghanistan. So, let's just ask ourselves a question. Where did Osama bin Laden then get all the contacts to run his operation after he, parted company with America? Who were these people that he used our equipment to train in the beginning, our, intelligence equipment, our communications equipment, our weaponry, our tactical training, right? Then he turns his back on America. Who exactly now does he know? Where does he get stuff like communications equipment? Do they just start building it in the caves of Afghanistan because their star pupil has been trained in how to use it? Where do they get this equipment now? Right? Where's all that stuff come from that he knows how to use? Who else? Is Russia making it, we assume? Well, they're enemies. How's he getting it from Russia? Right? Russia's fighting ISIS. So this guy, this star pupil of ISIS, that was a star pupil of our special forces, and you read the article because he was one of the guys we had terrorizing. This is in other words, this is a U.S. trained terrorist who some years back was terrorizing the country of Georgia when we didn't want them to stay with Russia. We wanted them separate so they can become a NATO alliance so we can point guns at Russia from their own border. That kind of stuff. That's what's always going on in these battles over these satellite states that used to be part of the Soviet Empire. Many of them are, of course, they're still populated with Russian people. And like the Ukraine, or at least the Crimea, which we try and paint as this Russian aggression, and I've spoken incorrectly. I knew it was at the time after World War II, but it wasn't Stalin. It was under Khrushchev that they gave the Crimea to the Ukraine for no apparent reason, even though it's the most tactical spot that they have. And so last year, those people, Ukraine and the Crimea, said, "Yeah, we want to be part of Russia, not part of NATO." And now we characterize that in our papers as their aggression. They went in there, but of course, history records that we went into Ukraine after that, and it was our coup, our U.S.-supported coup, to change the regime to a puppet government in Ukraine because we don't want Russia having that Crimea. And once that falls, it really takes away Russia's power. I mean, it's a big, big chip for them. And, my viewpoint, of course, is that this is all being orchestrated, but the players don't know. So they're playing their game of strategy, and Russia needs Crimea, and America's trying to keep them from it, and so that means everybody's got to fight. I'm always pointing out, where do they borrow the money? They borrowed from the same central bankers, funny enough. So, and I want to get to that in one of this next article. So let me just keep moving on. So yeah, our the guy we're most worried about that's one of these top commanders, maybe even second in command, if I remember the article, in ISIS, is the guy that we trained. And so again, where's he get access to his stuff? You think he's not still working on the deep cover for the people that trained him, huh? And then, but of course we wouldn't know where to go to get at him, right? We wouldn't know since we trained him, and now he's on his own, and he's essentially world enemy number one. But the American forces, as we're going to find out, I mean, we're just playing catch up. These guys, this is part of the reason they're tactically advanced, and we just can't keep up with them, even though we trained their commander. But we don't know which building to send one of our smart bombs to. We don't know where he comes from, right? We don't know who his contacts are. We don't know what his next likely, place of occupation would be so that we can maybe try and get there ahead of him. No, our pupil, boy, he's that smart. He's way ahead of us. So now let's get to this article, another one from the Business Insider UK that one of our watchers shared with us this past week. And this is from the 15th, just back a few days, by Jeffrey White, Washington Institute for Near East Policy. So this guy's a paid mouthpiece. You don't get to say that if you're disagreeing with the man. So what's this one headline? Here are the military implications of Russia's big Syria move. So this has got all sorts of really cool graphics and shows you all the territories, and with a nice color graph of where the different forces are occupying. Crazy. We know all that. Boy, we can make precise graphs, but we don't know where to send a smart bomb in to get this star pupil of ours. So anyway, it's a pretty, unlike the CNN stuff that's 500 words, this one might be 2,500. So I won't read it all. But essentially what it's pointing out, let's read a few of the small parts here. First, they talk about all the equipment being brought in. And of course, everything is reported to be. And some of the equipment might be and might be used for. Well, do we know anything for sure? Because really, from what I've seen on reporting, you can say anything here. How do I know which of this you've hyped up and which you haven't? Missions, potential missions for the projected Russian force include. Anybody get what? Now they're going to go ahead and get right into what, the details. But wait a minute, you just told me they're potential missions projected. So in other words, none of this some or all or none of this may or may not be happening. Well, that's a real help, isn't it? Right? Limited evidence suggests that Russian forces are already taking part. The emphasis of the Russian mission, whether offensive, defensive, training, or advisory, will become clearer as the size and types of forces are determined. Well, wait a minute, you just went through all this article telling me what's there, what might be there, what they might be doing. And now, really what you're saying is the emphasis of the mission, whether it's offense, come on. You just pointed out all the opportunity they have to do, and now you don't even know whether it's offensive, defensive, training, or advisory. So, I find these mouthpieces just absurd. I'm reading it and I'm thinking, okay, so far I've gone through hundreds of words, and all you've done is give me a list of their equipment. You've shown me a pretty map saying here's where everybody is. I have no way to know if that's true or not. It all looks so well documented, and yet what I find out in your documentation is you're basically reading me a list of stuff they have, stuff you assume they're bringing, stuff they might want to have if they're going to do this. So how do you even know where everybody is? I don't know. So anyway, he's got now implications for Syria. Essentially that this could keep Assad in power. That's what I believe we're supposed to get from it. If developed along the lines laid out above. See, in other words, this is all just a hypothetical. We don't know any of this. But if the Russian intervention would have major implications for the military situation in Syria. Of course, American strategists wouldn't be considering it. They're waiting to see. Let's wait. Is it offensive? Is it defensive? Is it training? Is it advisory? Once we know what Russia's doing, well, we can decide what we might want to do. It's just, really? Russian combat forces would presumably cooperate with regime forces, providing increased firepower, air support, and combat effectiveness. They'd presumably do that. We don't know if they're doing that. We can't tell you they started doing that on this date. We can't say that in this town, Russian forces combined with regime forces, which increased their firepower. We got pictures of the air support, and look what happened. See, no, this presumably. They could also conduct independent combat missions against important targets. Or they could also go out for ice cream. Or they could also just drop off Christmas gifts and go. Is this journalism? What can you tell me they are doing? Substantial Russian forces could give the regime a decisive edge on battlefields where they are employed, allowing key positions to be taken or held, and increasing attrition on rebel forces. Their appearance would also be a major morale booster for the regime while simultaneously disheartening rebel forces. Yeah, because of course no one expected Russia would come into this. I mean, Syria hasn't been talking to Putin. They don't know exactly what they're planning to do, so, they don't know if it'll be a major morale booster. I mean, their appearance would also be a major morale booster. Well, no kidding. When you see the cavalry show up in front of the people who are trying to slaughter you, but you don't think the cavalry was already ordered and was bound to show up? I mean, everything's really reaction. Opposition units are capable of defeating regime forces under some circumstances, but this is unlikely when Russian forces are present and active in any numbers. So what are we saying? What I hear we're saying is, well, now because Russia's involved, we're not going to be able to get rid of Assad. Right? Is that what they're saying? Opposition units are capable of defeating regime forces under some circumstances, but this is unlikely when Russian forces are present and active in any numbers. The rebels could inflict some casualties on Russian units, but are largely incapable of defeating them in serious combat, despite the hopes of those who recall Moscow's experience in Afghanistan. See, is that a hint? Hint at what's coming? Right? Moscow went into Afghanistan. Looks like, oops, Afghanistan's going to fall. So we got to send in billions of dollars and create genocide, essentially, in Afghanistan. And spend a fortune killing people to get the Russians out of there, which we, of course, invited into there to create just that situation. So now here we are, and what I see is very similar. Russia's coming in to support Assad, so this article is already intimating to me, you watch in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be able to show that, well, if it wasn't for Russia coming in there, the rebels, we were helping them, Turkey was helping them, we were going to get rid of this horrible Assad regime, but now that Russia's in there, well, it's just got to be all-out war because that's better than leaving Assad in there, right? Assad's already pointing out the refugee crisis is because the West is supporting terrorists. But does anyone take that and do some sort of in-depth investigation of what he's saying is true? Because it's pretty easy, actually, to find out that it is true. Russia's invited into Syria. They're allies. Syria's saying, I'm having a problem with ISIS. The whole world is afraid of ISIS. Israel's afraid of ISIS. America's afraid of ISIS. Jordan's afraid of ISIS. Saudi Arabia's afraid of ISIS. And Syria's afraid of ISIS. And Syria's saying, hey, Russia, can you help me with this ISIS problem? What kind of aggression is that on Russia's part? Israel and America are choosing to go in and bomb things in the country, in the sovereign nation of Syria, uninvited. Is that not the aggressor? Who's the aggressor here? Who's flying into Syria to bomb, supposedly, ISIS in Syria to fight ISIS without Syria saying, yes, you can come into my country? Right? Imagine that going on in America. Russia's just flying into America to help us with ISIS, and they're blowing up stuff in America when we haven't said, hey, that's okay. Yeah, we want your help. So who's the aggressor? And yet, why is it being painted the opposite? See, because the implications for Israel now, what he goes into is that Russian intervention could have a significant limiting effect on Israel's air operations over Syria and Lebanon, right? In particular, the presence of Russian manned air defense systems and aircraft could spur Israel to reconsider strikes in areas where Russian forces are deployed. Well, so, sorry, Israel. Russia has a right to be there and help their ally Syria against ISIS, if that means you can't fly into their country uninvited, well, isn't that just international law being upheld? So, and you've got Israel has reportedly struck weapons deliveries in the Latakia area in the past, but that would be a very dangerous action with Russian forces present, see? So yeah, they're screaming now because they're not getting to just take over that land and kill everybody the way they want to. But I don't think that's a problem because, of course, they saw all this coming. They're just screaming about it because what they want the West to do is get, oh, Russia the aggressor. Oh, Russia the aggressor, right? I mean, remember what's coming, people, in the prophecy. Armageddon. Where is Armageddon exactly? Anybody know on a map? You want to notice how close it is to Damascus? Anybody notice that? How close the plain of Megiddo is to Damascus? Right there. So, is it just a coincidence then that Damascus gets destroyed in a day? Is it just a coincidence that when Jesus returns according to the Quran, he returns to Damascus, to the mosque where the false Messiah and the Imam Mahdi of the Jews are there? And that's where Jesus returns, according to their scripture. Is it any coincidence that all these world forces are coming together right here in Syria right now? I mean, that, come on, if you want to tie it into our prophetic look, it doesn't take a lot of effort to see that. And since we know what's coming is Armageddon, why wouldn't we see this Russian buildup as something that's going to draw the Americans to increase into a much bigger battle? Anyway, that's the scary part that I see coming, that this rhetoric has to turn hot at some point, just like it did in Afghanistan. Okay, so then he's got implications for Turkey. Increased Russian military engagement in favor of the Assad regime would further consolidate U.S.-Turkish cooperation in Syria. Ankara sees Moscow as a historic adversary. Of course they do, because England supported the Ottomans over the Russians after World War I when they stabbed the Russians in the back. Just as they were stabbing the Hashemite kingdom, the Muslims, in the back, they were stabbing the Russians in the back and supporting the Ottomans. Before World War I. And then after World War I, the Bolshevik Revolution is what kept Moscow from what they had been promised, which was the Constantinople. So that's why Turkey's got no flavor for Russia, because they know for over 100 years Russia's been promised that that's going to be your city. See, because that's what connects the Bosphorus there is what connects that Baltic region with the Mediterranean, and that would give Russia the supremacy in the Mediterranean region if they had, or yes, it really would, but potential supremacy if they had the control of the Bosphorus and Constantinople. So what's obvious is Turkey will continue to do exactly what they're told, sending soldiers, killing people, sending refugees out of their country, whatever it takes. They will do what they're told to for the U.S. and NATO. And then the implications for the U.S., Russia's move is a clear challenge to Washington. This is what I love. Russia's move is a challenge. Not this is something that this is just part of the chessboard that Washington now is going to play its next move. No, Russia's move is a clear challenge to Washington, exploiting what Moscow presumably sees as a U.S. reluctance to act in Syria. See, again, intimating that we've had a reluctance to act, but darn it, we're just going to have to put that behind us. We got to get in there because Russia's going to keep the Assad regime in there, right? And for some reason, if the whole world has to come apart, Bashar al-Assad has to get out of Syria. Has anyone seen a sufficient essay or expose on why Bashar al-Assad absolutely has to get out of that region? Does anyone know? Because I don't. Anyway, this is what I don't want to have to read the rest of this article because this is all just bull. It's all just propaganda, and so I want to give my 2 cents that the propaganda is pointing out that we are, in fact, going to see Russian and NATO forces have to confront each other in Syria. And that's what they're prepping us for by painting Russia as the aggressor, acting as if, well, Russia's just, if they do this and if they do that, and presumably if they were to do this, well, we won't be able to get Assad out of there. So, of course, that means we'll have to respond, because getting Assad out of there apparently is worth World War III. And now the last article I want to talk about is this New York Times article. This is also from September 15th, and it's titled, "Clashes Damage Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, and Jordan Warns Israel." So here's to wrap it right up with the prophecy now. We're expecting a false Messiah. We've been anticipating that the Hashemite king of Jordan fits that bill, because he has Jewish blood, and he has the say over the Temple Mount. And here's where, we're getting a little taste now. As of the 15th, there was a clash up there. They're talking about Palestinian youths taking up positions inside the mosque. And I guess what they're trying to point out is these Palestinian youths are throwing rocks at Jewish visitors and inciting violence, telling the Jewish visitors they can't, get away from here and such. Now, everything I've learned about Islam, that's not very Islamic. So there's these sort of things everywhere. But now when you look at the response, riot gear, police, they're only accusing of kids, Palestinian youths, with rocks. That's it. In Tuesday's fighting, Palestinian youths, some masked, took up positions inside the 8th century Al-Aqsa Mosque on the holy site, where they had built barricades from wood and iron rods, and from the closets where worshippers leave their shoes before entering. And this is it. They're barricaded behind some wood. It says they were throwing rocks. The youths pelted police officers. And so I guess it didn't even say they were throwing rocks at Jewish. They're just, in the article, they're accusing these rioters of harassing or perpetuating violence on Jewish visitors. But here they say they pelted officers who used small grenades in an effort to quell the demonstration. A small fire erupted on some of the wooden panels, and they're pointing out that these Israeli forces did some damage to some of these beautiful ancient pieces of wood. And in fact, if I could find it here, I thought this was absurd. One of these pieces that caught on fire, they reported it in the Israeli report, was that some kids with firecrackers, they attempted to throw the firecrackers, and the firecrackers started the thing on fire. Let's see. Miss Samri said the blaze was ignited by Palestinians who threw firecrackers. But a mosque official, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because he feared arrest, said Israeli forces were to blame because they fired stun grenades that burned holes in the mosque carpet and probably ignited a wooden panel. So which one sounds more realistic? Firecracker? I've been around firecrackers my whole life. They're loud. They make a sound. I've seen people blow them up in their open hand, right? I've seen them blow up all over floors, and I've never seen one start a fire. Never. Not on a carpet, nothing. Because they blow up. That's it. There's very little fire there, but these grenades, okay, wait a minute. That could start a fire. So anyway, I find, and then Jordan, the Hashemite king of Jordan, came out and warned that these sort of things would hurt the relationship of Jordan and Israel, and call for a response from Jordan. Any more provocations, this is a quote from King Abdullah of Jordan, any more provocations in Jerusalem will affect the relationship between Jordan and Israel. Jordan will have no choice but to take action, unfortunately. Okay? See, why is it Jordan that's speaking up? See, because this Hashemite king, he's the one with the say in the Muslim world on that Temple Mount. He's the one that asked permission years ago for a 5th minaret to be built. He's the one that we assume is going to provide the covenant with this Jewish state to allow them to rebuild their temple next to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the original site. They've already agreed that the mosque is sitting on a piece of property that's adjacent to the temple property, so that they don't need to fight over the actual land. They just have to agree to share it and build the temple next to the mosque. And this is something, of course, that Jordan's been, he's been this champion of the interfaith acceptance. And so we've been watching all that come along for many years. So now to see this, and now this, I guess, will bring me to my closing remarks that about, again, the Goyim, which I've mentioned. And I had brought something up on that, and I don't have the time today, but I would encourage people to look that up, Goyim, the way the Talmud speaks of Goyim, basically the Gentiles. It's exactly the way Westerners think of Muslims, that God demands that they treat everyone else differently, and that ultimately everyone is going to become, a Muslim. And if the Muslims have to chop heads off to get that done, well, that's sanctified and validated by their religious scripture. What I've learned in the last 6 months or so of study is that that's not true at all according to Islam. It's just a fabrication. But what it is true of is the Talmud, which is the authoritative scriptures that this Jewish state uses, and their rabbis. So now think of the Mossad. Through deception thou shalt do war. So isn't it interesting that real Islam demands that they, just like Christianity kind of thing, turn the other cheek. You're not allowed to kill. You're not allowed to kill. Murder. You're not allowed to murder. Certainly you're not allowed to terrorize. You're not allowed to spread Islam that way at all. You're not allowed to emigrate and use terrorism. See, but the Talmud, well, you quite literally are. You quite literally are allowed to lie, steal, cheat, and murder Goyim, right? So that's where you find this story. And so when you add that to this Ashkenazi Jewish situation where the people that came there, the people that actually put the money up, that claim to be Jews, the Rothschilds and these sort of people, they're not of the blood. They're not of the seed. These are not God's people being brought back to the land. This is a con, right? This is a con. And when you look at the Mossad, through deception, thou shalt make war, right? Come on, let's take it seriously now and imagine what kind of deception. What would we see? You mean like a country who feels it's okay to kill everybody but their own culture, accusing the people they want to kill of being that way? So you can look in the modern Jewish history, all sorts of atrocities committed on the Arabs, and many of them are in response to holy times, when they feel a sort of extra or power of God, right? Because it's one of their holy days, and so they feel, okay, this is a day when we can't be defeated, so it's a day to go, provoke or take on one of our enemies. And so I've seen some evidence. I'm not well enough versed to be able to let you in on all of it, but it seems to me that these people are quite willing to use terror and to lie about it, to take certain days that they think, God wants us to take advantage of this day and go do something, and that something might just be terrorize the Al-Aqsa Mosque, I don't know, but I find in the article it seems a pretty weak, when you look at the way these guards come in, there's a little video, just like a 30-second video, and you look at the way this Israeli force comes in, and what you're talking about is kids in masks, barricaded behind some wooden closets, and you need to fire grenades at them. You can't just come in there with and physically sort of, like they do with schools or any other sort of protests where you sort of make a barrier of authority. Say, okay, protesters, you're on that side, but we're not going to let you get violent. But yeah, you want to stand there behind your barricade in your mask? Well, okay. We don't need to harm anyone. We don't need to harm the mosque over that. But again, you always see excessive use of force when it comes to Israel. Always, always, always. And I believe that that's what we're just seeing here is one more example. And not only that, to bring it to the front of everybody's attention, that there is this tension between these people, because that tension has got to escalate. I'll end today, Dad, with that same idea that what we can see, I didn't talk much about the refugees this week because it's just everywhere. Everyone's getting all the propagandized scoop. And that's why what I want to add is it looks like they've known about it for quite some time, because there's been 2 million of them in Turkey building up over the last few years leaving Syria. And they were welcome in Turkey. And now that the UN, U.S., cooperating with Turkey, right? Didn't we read that? In other words, U.S. is saying, hey, you don't want Russia to take you over. You better do exactly what we say. And what we say is send these Syrians out of your country. Get them out of there now. It's time to start the refugee crisis. It's time to start setting up for the false flag events. It's time to get Russia into Syria so everybody can get ready now to start moving troops. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I guarantee that what we're after is more of this fear. The Muslims have to be made to be on the verge of terrorizing the whole world so the whole world can come together to stop them. So anyway, Dad, I hope that helps, and I'll talk to you next week.
Well, that was quite a great report, Tony. Thank you very much. I'm sure everybody will want to pass this around to all their friends. And we thank you for listening. And we ask that you remember this ministry in your prayers. This keeps coming to you because of the contributions that you're making. The Lord has always taken care of this ministry for 35 years, and He takes care of it through you. And so we ask you just